Hello and welcome to today's video. My name is Ginie. I am a 6'2" self-projected projector, and in today's video I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal journey through the deconditioning process, particularly pertaining to the G center and throat. One of the reasons why I wanted to start talking about this and kind of like documenting it is one, because I feel like I've really been going through this season of unleashing the power of my voice, which I have done some content around that, but I kind of wanted to again think back into like how the journey has unfolded up to now, because I do find myself like I'm right at the point where I'm facing like this pretty big personal decision that has a lot to do with using my voice in a way that I've never done before. So I kind of like wanted to pause a little bit and kind of like soundboard on what this process has looked like for me. And I also recently, like, the conversations in my DMs that I've been having lately have been so amazing. And I actually had someone ask me a little bit about this, and they were sharing how like they can tell the difference of like how when they found me about a year ago, how they see and they feel the shift in my voice. Like I think they, let me make sure I get this right. Okay, they say that in my last videos I seem more opened up, brighter, lighter, since like when I first started putting out videos. And this is very true. I've been thinking a lot about this. If you go watch like some of my earlier videos, the audio quality is awful. It's so bad. Let's go see when I published my first video. I want to say it was easily maybe over 2 years ago. Let's see. I actually have stuff from 2 years ago that I never released. There's a couple of videos, but I think the stuff that I started sharing and publishing was a year ago. And like I said, the audio quality is bad. I was filming on my personal phone, which I am not a huge fan of talking on the phone. Everybody that knows me, like in my personal life, knows that I prefer to be texted. Like if they're calling me, it's because there's like no other option. And I also have a friend who, like, I'll text them. Like the other day we were meeting somewhere like where they work. I've never been to where they work. I kind of had an idea where it was, but it was late at night. I could not see where the place was. It turns out the sign was turned off. That's why I drove past it like 3 times. And it was a sign. The sign was turned off and I couldn't tell that was the place. So anyways, I text them. I'm like, hey, I'm a little bit lost. I have no idea where I am. I know I'm close, but I don't know how to get to where we're supposed to meet. And they sent me a voice note, like instead of calling me, and I would have been okay with them calling me. But I thought it was so funny that they sent me a voice note. And I'm like, that felt a little bit good because I can see that they're honoring, my process and not, calling me. Because you know what? I think it scares me when people call, or like having to talk on the phone. There's a lot of like, I feel a lot of pressure. You can tell by the sound of my voice. And I also feel like, I don't know, we could do like a whole video on this, so I won't go too much into it, but not that I'm gonna do a video on this, but there's a lot I could say from my experience on like with phone calls. With my mom, like I could be on the phone for hours. But I think I have to really, really know someone, and the conversation has to be really good. And with most people, I find like the conversation is kind of like very superficial, or they want to talk about things that, I don't know. Okay, my experience has been like people would call me and I kind of be waiting for them to get to the point, like, why are they calling me? What is it that they need? Kind of thinking that people always needed something from me. And it came a point where like they're silent and I'm silent because I'm like, they called me. And I felt kind of like I was having to push the conversation forward. I'm like, why am I doing this if like it wasn't me who decided to call this person, they're calling me? Like they should they should be guiding the conversation. Like what do they want? Like I got things to do. Not that I had things to do, but you know, like resting or reading or doing other things instead of just holding the phone and being silent. I don't know. So sometimes I would get to the point where I would kind of like lose my patience and kind of say, okay, what was there something you needed? Like, is there something I could help you with? And they were like, oh no, I just wanted to say hello. And I couldn't understand. And I guess it's like a very tribal thing to do. People just call each other just because my dad did this a lot. Like, he would always be calling people, and I wouldn't understand it. I guess I always thought that I'd be bothering people if I did that. I don't know. As I was editing the video, I realized that I never finished telling the story I originally started with. I find this is a very like projector thing to do. I can go off on so many tangents within just one conversation, but I always find like it ends up working out in a very interesting way. But anyways, the whole point of me sharing that story is that I didn't realize that the speaker or the mic on my phone didn't work properly. And that's also one of the reasons why the audio quality on my first couple of videos isn't amazing. With time, I kind of picked up on it and I ordered these little microphones that I use now to record, so the sound quality is a little bit better. But I also, like, as I'm editing, I really do turn up the volume on the sound as much as possible, because I find that even with the mic, my phone my voice is still not very loud. Um, but yeah, that was the whole point of the phone thing. I didn't realize that the speaker didn't work because I never really used my phone to make phone calls, and it was years later or many, many months later that I realized that there was something up with the speaker. Okay, so now we can continue. Let's get back on track to the point, the purpose of this video. I've been thinking a lot about my journey, and the root cause practice program, RCP, has been such a huge component in me being able to see where a lot of my conditioning, or the root of a lot of my of things that I was experiencing, especially with the throat, where that was coming from. So I want to talk a little bit about what I've discovered about myself throughout that process, and then hopefully it'll help someone. If not, well, you know, just me sharing my experience. When I find that when I do that, it tends to pull things out of people. So we're gonna see where this goes. Don't really have like notes in front of me or anything like that. When I signed up for RCP, it was more the intention of I wanted to learn more about the mind-body connection. I hadn't realized how much I was going to learn about myself, and how like the process that was going to take me through to be able to find the root of a lot of my issues. I found that before RCP, it was very, very difficult for me to find the root, because the mind had built such a strong defense system that wasn't letting me access a lot of my beliefs. It wasn't letting me see things because it wasn't safe to do so. One of the things that I really struggled with RCP is that it's got there is a lot of stuff that you go through on your own, like some of the modules you go through on your own, but are a lot of live calls that are open to participation. Nobody's forced to participate or anything like that, but it's a very like open system. If you want to say something, you just jump in. And that went completely against what I was taught growing up. I grew up under the mentality of like children are meant to be seen and not heard, and by seen it's like don't like practically be invisible. That's the way I understood it. So many times during the calls, like it was very challenging because I felt like I wanted to ask a question, but I wasn't sure like when to jump in. I didn't like it. It felt so like against my nature. I wanted to like even putting up like hitting the little icon to raise my hand felt like a lot. And I've always known that I've struggled with participating in school. This was one of the biggest things that was always commented on my report card. Not participating in college. I did have one class where participation was like, if you don't participate, it's going to affect your grade. Oh my gosh, did I suffer through that class? Because I felt forced. Like I felt like I had to. I felt pressured. With RCP, I don't feel pressured, but there is a huge component of participating in group settings. So as I was going through the course the first round, I learned to embrace it. Like I'm like, okay, this is uncomfortable, but we're gonna do it anyways because we're learning to do hard things, and it's only hard because we're not used to it and all this thing, like coaching myself through it. So from this experience of like RCP, another thing that I noticed, especially in my mentoring pod, my first mentor, I learned so much from them. I think they're going to be like one of those people that I look back and I'm just so thankful that I got to work with them and I got to meet them and that they exist. Because when during early on in my pod of my round, the mentor said a comment because they noticed that I wasn't really participating. I mean, I was there, I was present, I was holding space, but I wasn't really talking. Even if we were invited to share, I couldn't. It felt like I couldn't, even though I wasn't saying that, it felt like I couldn't. And one of the questions they asked me, or kind of like observations that they made, they're like, Ginie, I would guess that maybe you've never really been in a group of women like this that share things. And it was said more, I think, in a form of observation, but that kind of stuck with me. And after the call, I kept thinking about that. I'm like, is that true? I'm like, no, I'm used to being in group settings, but always as an observer. Because when I was little, I grew up with this belief of like, again, you're not supposed to talk when the grown-ups are talking. You're supposed to stay quiet and only talk if someone asks you a question. And even then, it didn't feel safe to answer the questions. There's that. And there's also this other piece that I started to pick up on that had to do with safety as well. But for me, when I was little, I always remember like how close I wanted to be with mom. And I even have pictures where, let me see if y'all can see it on my phone. Okay, let's see if can you guys see that? In this picture, I'm about anywhere from 3 to 4 years old. And this was me with my mom. You see how I have my hand wrapped around her leg? That was basically me. That's what I remember growing up. For me, my mom was she was like my security blanket. You know how babies have like these blankets? My brother is really good at finding and flipping these blankets, and we've got parents that are like, thank you for selling this because we needed a backup or we lost it, or we like to have backups so that our child doesn't freak out. My mom was like my physical security blanket, and I always remember like I would hold on to her skirt. Here, I must have been really feeling self-conscious or picking up on a lot of things from the environment because I was literally holding onto her leg. Other times I would hold onto her skirt and it would feel like I would like twirl around her, but always like keeping in contact with her skirt or with her in some way. It was the way in which I learned how to cope. So I learned that if I was quiet, if I didn't say anything, if I was practically invisible, that meant I could stay close to mom, and mom was usually with the grown-ups. There were usually always kids in the environment, but I never really felt accepted or safe with the kids. So I hadn't realized how much this pattern had stuck with me growing up, and that this was essentially like the root of where me not feeling safe to express myself or to share because I thought that I wasn't allowed to, that was the right thing to do, I kept doing that even though, it's been a minute since I was 3 or 4. So that was kind of like one of the first major pieces that I got from this puzzle of like, now I'm starting to understand why I do this and where it comes from. I was very aware of what I did. I feel like the channel of awareness plays a huge role in that, but I'm missing like the deeper why, the 61, like, why do I do this? I hadn't really ever asked myself, or if I did, it was so hidden because my brain wasn't ready for me to come across that piece, that I didn't have access to the deeper root. So after my personal round of RCP, it was still very hard for me to open up and talk. I want to say that I've definitely noticed a bigger shift during the second time around. I started RCP towards like the end of January, and we're currently middle of July, give or take. So it's been 5-ish months of creating more awareness around these patterns and doing inner child work and things like that. But in this round, where I'm participating as an intern, in my pod this time, I started creating more awareness around certain beliefs I had tied to using my voice. There was like a fear of people, which for me came from religious conditioning. There's this very common belief among my denomination that it's not safe to interact with people that do not belong to our denomination. There's this fear that they're going to lead us away from God, or away from, our belief system and things like that. So it tends to be very protective, like a very protective group, which before, to me, I didn't really perceive it that way because that's all I knew. It wasn't until I started digging more into like things that were coming up in my body that I realized a lot of these issues were created or reinforced not only by my childhood upbringing, but also by like the religious upbringing. So I was starting to see how this fear of people was playing a pretty big role in me not feeling safe to share. So we have the piece about like, as a little girl, like I do remember times where my mom would say, okay, we're gonna go, to this place and there's gonna be people, but when the adults talk, you don't talk, you can listen, but don't talk, essentially was the rule. And what would happen is, like, in the group setting, I wouldn't do a lot of talking, but I would be absorbing everything. And afterwards, like on our way home, or once we got home, I would just start sharing with mom everything that I saw, because then that was okay. Like, me sharing what I saw with mom outside of that group environment was allowed. And when I think back of like where maybe she got this from, is this belief of children, there's this show, like, children say the darndest things or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it's called, but there's this, like, children don't really have a filter. They kind of say whatever's on their mind, and then this could lead to them embarrassing the parents. So kind of looking back, I can see how probably my mom picked up on this belief from grandma. Grandma was super strict. Like, my mom was strict, but compared to my grandma, there was definitely a lot more freedom of expression, even though I never really perceived it that way. Like, I knew I could tell her things, and at the same time, there was a lot of fear that was unconscious, or that I didn't allow myself to express. So I was kind of also noticing this pattern, how it played out, where like in group settings, I was holding back, but then I was kind of also looking for an opportunity to connect with people on a one-on-one basis outside of the group setting. So that was like another piece. Okay, so we have like the childhood stuff of like that rule, you're not supposed to talk in public. It's not safe to talk to people because they're dangerous. Because they're dangerous. And there's another belief that I think these were the three big ones, that whatever I did share wasn't going to be well received. Having the channel of structuring it, when I look back, I feel that the times that I kind of did put myself a little bit more out there and maybe blurted out my truth, it resulted in a little bit of rejection from the people I was interacting with. Now, back then, what I didn't realize is that when I was experiencing rejection, it was more of like a more empowering way of seeing it would have been redirection. This is just letting me know that these are not my people, this is not my environment. This is something I keep reminding myself because these three beliefs were quite ingrained. They were quite deep. Okay, so during this round of RCP as an intern, there was 1 week where our mentor was going to be out of town. They were going to be traveling. So they asked, there were 3 interns in this pod. 2 of them were level 2s, and then there was me as a level 1. They asked if who would like to lead the group that week that they were going to be out. Me, of course, I'm like, I don't want to lead. Like, I am not interested in leading. There's no way I'm ready for that. So I'm just quiet, and then someone else volunteers. I'm like, oh, thank God, whew, dodged a bullet there. But then during each mentoring session, we have an opening and we have a close. During the opening, it's kind of like a grounding or a meditation to kind of connect everyone in and bring them into the space. And then a closing, it's like, okay, we're closing out the pod. We're kind of like, everyone's going back to whatever it is that they're doing, their day, their journey, their life, and so on. And we close the pod. So my mentor asked Ginie, would you be interested in doing an opening or a closing? By this point, I've already started to create some awareness on how I've been kind of like restraining the channel of structuring because of this tendency to blurt things out that haven't always worked in my favor. And I'm starting to play with the energy of the channel of structuring and tying it with the belief of like whatever I say is going to be well received, and if it isn't, that's not on me type of vibe. So I kind of blurred out, I kind of don't want to close, I don't want to open, I don't want to close, but if I had to choose, I would rather close than open. The reason behind that is because like I whenever we're doing a meditation or a grounding, my mind wanders so much. I have such a hard time staying present with the meditation. Part of it, what I've noticed, is the 41's like always wanting to anticipate what's coming. So for example, one time one of the other members in the pod did this beautiful meditation, and there was a box, and before, like, as soon as I was presented with the box, I immediately opened it. And then like a couple of seconds later, they're like, okay, go ahead and open the box, and I'm kind of like over here like, oops, I kind of already opened it, So the channel of awareness is kind of like narrating. I'm hearing individual circuitry, very acoustic component to it. I'm hearing all these things in my head. It's very, like, it takes a lot of concentration and a lot of focus for me to, like, quiet my mind during these meditations and groundings. And I also feel like I haven't quite grasped groundings. Like, I get the notion of what they do. They're supposed to ground us and bring us into the body, which is very hard for me because I have a very active brain, active body. There's a lot of chatter, individual circuitry, a lot of chatter. So that was my reasoning around not wanting to do a grounding, because I feel like I would suck at this. Like, people are going to pick up on, like, I'm over here and I'm supposed to be grounding people. Like, no, I'd rather close. Like, closing seems easier. We're just supposed to pick a poem and read it, and that's it. So I'm like, sign me up for the closing. So I was assigned to do the closing. And the whole week, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to set an intention for something to find me, something meaningful, something nice, And nothing was dropping in, y'all. So, like, a day before, I'm scrambling on Pinterest trying to find a poem, like, on inner child or something that felt like it was, significant, meaningful, not something that I was just, like, trying to find quickly. So, we have that happened, okay? And that week, I feel like I really went deeper into creating more awareness on the root of all these issues. And I'm talking myself through the process, and I'm like, look, also doing like inner child work and talking to my inner child, because I had done a lot of inner child work with RCP, but every time I was asked to like visualize or come into contact with my inner child, she would not speak to me. She would nod, or she, like, I knew she was aware, she understood what I was saying, but she would not speak to me, and I could not understand why. I was starting to see it more clearly, as I started diving deeper and layers started being, peeled back and things like that. But, where was I going with this? Hold on. Okay, I was talking about coaching myself through the process. And what I started to do recently is like bring up my inner child. So I'm having a conversation with her as well. I'm like, look, I get it. For pretty much our entire life, our voice has been suppressed, repressed. We've been holding it back out of fear. A lot of it has been perceived fear. There was no need to be afraid, and yet we started creating all these stories in our head of like what would happen 41, anticipating things that didn't necessarily have to play out that way based, on our past experiences. But the thing is, like, it doesn't have to be that way anymore. We know better. We've been learning a lot more. So I know this is going to be uncomfortable, but if we want to start tapping into a different experience, we've got to start playing with doing things differently. And kind of like one of the things that really helped me with this pod is that our mentor, like very early on in the pod, she very vulnerably shared how like when we're picking our pods, they do have this page where each mentor does a little video to share a little bit about themselves, and then you can kind of feel into whose pod you'd like to participate in. And our mentor is bringing up how like she filmed the video, and she looks like very, like, the way she was speaking didn't feel very natural, and it wasn't natural, and she couldn't get it to come out more natural, so she was sharing that very vulnerably. And then she's like, you know what, it's just, it is what it is. And also several times I would notice, especially during the beginning, she would mention how like she felt like she was gonna die as she was speaking or leading the pod, and she didn't. It was just her mind, or that fear that she had of speaking up and guiding people and leading the pod. So that really helped me like see how, or her role modeling, how she really felt about that. Like, she was nervous, there was fear, there are all these things beneath the surface, even though it didn't like really seem like that. I mean, like maybe a little bit of nervousness, but I find that's quite normal as humans, whenever we're sharing in a group, unless we have a lot of practice or we're really gifted in that area, there's always a little bit of nervousness and fear. So I kind of like took her words of like, it feels like you're gonna die, like, that's normal, because that's literally what it felt like every time I even thought about sharing something, even if I didn't. So I'm having this conversation with my inner child. I'm like, it's probably gonna feel like we're gonna die, but we're not gonna die. And if we're looking at this logically, we've kind of already been through a round of RCP. We've already experienced the pod. It felt safe. Like, you didn't die. It's almost like people wanted you. They're waiting for you to share your voice, to speak up. You're not going to get in trouble for talking. This isn't school. This isn't mom, where she gave you a look if you even attempted or were about to say something, or, It's not like that. It's a safe space, and we've seen that it's a safe space. And yes, there are things that are going to come up, but we're not really going to know what's coming up or what wants to come up unless we start talking in these group settings. So I know it's going to be hard. I know it's going to be uncomfortable, but it's only going to be like that in the beginning while we get used to this. So I'm like, okay. That kind of happened the week that in between, like, where we had that meeting with our mentor, and they were telling us they were going to be out of town. The next week, the week where they weren't in the pod, like the interns were in charge of the pod, that's when I really started to open up. And I talked a lot more during that session. And in the beginning, yes, it felt like I was gonna die. Like, I felt my heart pounding. I felt my voice shaking a little bit. I could tell by like the quality of my voice. There was fear, there was nervousness, there was uncomfortableness, all that. But like, I know we're doing it anyway, because if we want a different experience, we have to start trying something new. And then after that, I was able to see like all the fears that came up, and then I would question them: is this really true? How did people really react to what you had to say? And then like one of the comments that I got, like, I shared something. I was talking about like guiding energy and moving energy as projectors. um, One of my teammates shared how, like, as I was talking, she felt her arms tingle, and how, like, she thought it was very beautiful and very, what I had to share was really helpful. So I'm like, okay, take that with you. Use that as evidence that the way things played out in the past weren't always necessarily the truth. Like, there were moments when you empowered people, but you focused on all the times where you messed up, or you put your foot in your mouth, or someone didn't receive things like you wanted them to. Let's focus now on the people that have positive feedback to share with you. And not to say that there won't be negative feedback, but I needed to focus on the positive in order to help myself see the power, the beauty, the good stuff that could come from me sharing my voice, sharing my thought process, sharing my observations, sharing my insights. And this is like, it feels like a very collective thing, the sharing, right? I might not get the tribal energetics most of the times, but I feel like it's easier for me to tap into the collective. Primarily the individual experience, and then the collective, and then, third place would be the tribal. I still struggle with the tribal. Okay, so that was the week that the mentor was out. The following week, when they came back, again, I told myself, okay, we're going to keep going. We're going to keep doing this, and we're going to keep doing it until it becomes normal, until the fear starts shrinking and getting smaller, because, we're working with it. We're not avoiding it. We're not suppressing it. We're not rejecting it. We're not judging it. We're not criticizing. We're like saying, yeah, come here. Let me hold you while we do this together, you know? And after we closed the pod, um, the mentor during we had a little meeting like with our mentor afterwards, and they were kind of like, whoa, like Ginie's really talking. Like, I kind of felt that feedback of like, oh my gosh, like she really opened up. And it was in that span of a week, that they had gone out of town. I felt it. But it was also like a very intentional, conscious decision to like, I need to start doing things differently, because I'm kind of fed up with my own stuff. We need to start doing things differently to see what comes up to the surface again, and then be able to know what to work through. Okay, so from there, we had a session, a call with Tracy. Tracy is the creator of the RCP course. During this call, she guides us through this visualization. And what I got from it is that I was able to see that two parts. There were two parts that were in play, that were activated at the moment. I saw a really young version of myself, again, the 3-4-year-old, and she was sitting in a chair, and the chair, she looked really small. And the chair, like, it felt like the chair could swallow her up, because like the chair was bigger than her. She looked, and I got this feeling that like she feels really small, and she was kind of like just slouching in the chair. She looked sad. She looked really sad, and she wasn't talking. She was not talking, which didn't really surprise me, because I did have some awareness around this. So there was that part, and then there was another part that looked older. I got around the age of 26. when I was 26, that was my, I think what they call like your golden year. I turned 26 on the 26th. So there was this part of me, and they both kind of looked a little bit zoned out. But as I'm looking at the 26-year-old part of me, I got this feeling of like, oh my gosh, she's so naive. Like, both of them are so naive. They don't know what's coming. They don't know that a couple of years down the line, they're gonna lose their mom. And as all this is going on, like, I'm still trying to follow the meditation. I'm starting to cry. I'm quite activated. And the next question we were asked is like, what are these parts believing about themselves? For the 3-4-year-old, it came almost automatically. It was like, she's not allowed to talk. That's what she believes. She still believes, after all the work I've done, after all the work we've done, she still believes that she's not allowed to talk. And I was like, oh, wow, that's pretty big. With the 26-year-old version, I wasn't quite able to get what the belief was in that moment. From there, we kind of like finish the meditation, and we get put out in breakout rooms. At this point, like, I'm really crying. But I'm allowing myself to cry. I felt really, really sad. And the people, there were 3 in our group. The other 2 people are sharing, and then they kind of asked me, what was my experience, and then I started sharing what my experience was. And when I started sharing how, like, I got this word of, like, when I was looking, especially at the older part of me, the word naive came up to the surface. And one of the people in the group kind of brought it up to my attention, how I was being quite hard on myself. And one of the things that they said was like, how could she have known? Because one of the things that I shared was that I felt like the 26 was kind of like the last year where I felt like life was perfect. And I use the term quite loosely because it wasn't that life was perfect, but definitely definitely like after 26, a lot of what I perceived bad things started happening. And this kind of coincides with like my Saturn return, which I didn't even know those were a thing back then. Otherwise, maybe things would have made a little bit more sense. But they kind of like brought it up to my attention, like, how could she have known that that was going to happen? It wasn't being naive, she couldn't have known. And I kind of took that with me, and I'm like, why? Because at this point, like, I already had some awareness around why I was so hard on myself, which I do plan on talking about that in a separate video because it's quite interesting, like, where this comes from for me. But kind of like the words that stuck with me is like, how could she have known that was coming? And I immediately thought of the 41, because the gift of 41 has to do with the anticipation. I feel like many times throughout my life, even before I was introduced to human design and all of this, I could kind of feel what was coming before it came. So I was being hard on myself because I was like, why didn't you see this coming? Like, you could have done something to either minimize or be more prepared, or maybe things didn't have to go down the way they did. A lot of regret. And when I look back, like, I feel like I had awareness. I felt like something's off, but I didn't know what to do about it. And I also didn't have the permission. I hadn't given myself the permission to use my voice and ask questions. I was just always kind of told what to do, and that programming never got updated. So I took those 2 pieces and I started working with them. And it wasn't until like this conversation in this group that I was able to see the belief that the 26-year-old version of me had. And it came up as there's this fear of the unknown. Because at 26, like, I didn't know what was coming. It's this theme, this concept, this pattern of like not knowing what's coming. And me perceiving that what what happened, in retrospect, was very bad. I was about to experience some of the hardest transitions I've ever had in my life. Today, before I sat down to film, or even I decided to do this practice within inside this membership I signed up for, where it teaches you how to transmute energy, and I focused on the fear of using my voice. I originally started with I wanted to clear feeling unworthy, but I'm like, no, my throat. I woke up feeling my throat a little bit sore. My voice felt a little bit raspy, so I'm like, let's clear the throat. So kind of how, or 2 minutes in, I'm like, let me switch it up. Let me clear the throat stuff. So I worked on clearing and transmuting the energy of fear, the patterns of not openly using my voice and all that. That's what I focused on shifting. I do feel there's a little bit more work to do around that, and I will be doing that, the next couple of days, as long as it takes. But let me see where I want to go with it from here. I want to say that definitely the process of deconditioning is not easy. It is not for the faint of heart. And I think this is why it's important to educate yourself and find the support, find the right community, find the right tools that are particular to you and what you need to help you through the process, so that you can, me, it feels that you can have your own back. You learn to have your own back, especially if you have a lot of people pleasing tendencies, a lot of guilt and things like that. It can be very challenging. And for me, one of the biggest things that has helped is doing the inner child work, seeing these parts that get activated as just parts of me, younger parts of me. What do they need, and things like that, which is essentially what I've learned through the root cause practice program. And I love doing these sessions with people, because they can be so transformational, and they can really help you get to the root and clear that out, so that you can not have these parts of you who hold you back or paralyze you, or keep you from moving forward and stepping into who you're here to be and what you're here to contribute and share with the world. So I feel that piece is still one that I'm currently working through. Taking some time to kind of not do so from a place of being triggered, but from okay, this is my authentic voice, this is what I want to share, this is what I want to say, mostly this is what I've experienced, this is how I feel it impacted me, and this is what I'm doing differently in order to heal those parts of me and step into a more empowered way of being. And it's so interesting how you start to feel how all the work that you've put in starting to work, or how it just starts adding up. And I also think it's going to be so interesting and beautiful, once I move through this next phase, what I learn, what happens, how things unfold, how the quality of my voice changes even more from, a year ago. And I feel right now it's happening a lot quicker. I do think that RCP and the support and the people that I've met there and how they've helped me, see my blind spots and things like that, has really helped, and kind of it feels like things are happening a little bit quicker. So yeah, I kind of wanted to share that one for my personal record, to be able to kind of look back on this and say, oh yeah, I remember when I was super afraid of using my voice, and now it just seems whatever, just say things, doesn't matter what people think or how they react, or what happens, as long as it's coming from the G center, that's gonna be okay, even if people don't get it. So okay, I think that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I know this was a long one. If you have any comments, insights, takeaways that you would like to share, feel free to comment down below. If you would like to follow along on my journey, I invite you to come visit me on Instagram. My handle is @Ginie Salcedo. there and on my website you can find more information of different ways of working with me. And I will see you next time. Bye. In my film, it also happens in other instances too. My eyes get quite teary and my nose starts to run. Otherwise, like, editing these videos would be so much easier and faster. But we work with it. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna try this song because I have the AC turned on. It's summertime. You've been following me for a while. You know I'm not the biggest fan of summertime. It is a little bit hot in here, but I'm concerned that it might be a little bit noisy, so let's do a little bit of a sound check. I was right. It's too noisy, so we're going to turn it off. The temperature's, it's comfortable in here. I can do this. Okay. Y'all, do you like my top? I found this thrifting. We went thrifting Friday. Today's Sunday. And I found it was brand new with tags. It's from Target. Like about over a year ago, I started looking at Target for clothes. I never went to shop like at Target or Walmart, but after I gained a lot of weight, I was having trouble finding clothes that were cute, comfortable, and relatively affordable. So I went browsing through Target. They have some pretty cute stuff, but the tops there, something like this would be around like easy $30, 35 bucks, and I cannot bring myself to paying $30 for a top. I have purchased a lot of dresses at Target that are around anywhere from 20 to 30, but for me, in my head, it's like it's a whole dress. I don't need to worry about pants, and if I get like a $30 top, then not that I don't have pants at home, but I don't know, from my perspective, $30 for a top seemed a lot, but I found this one thrifting and it was like $6. So it has like the embroidered rose. Oh, I love it. It is wrinkled, but I don't think you can really tell. But okay, let's get situated here so we can start talking. I always find it funny when I see people like on their stories share how like they feel awkward or weird looking at pictures of themselves, like after like they're looking at pictures from a photo shoot or things like that, or that they don't like the sound of their voice. I'm always like, I can't relate to that. Like, give me a mirror. Like, I love looking at myself in the mirror. Like, that is so self-centered of you, Ginie. I don't do this in public or like when people are around. When nobody's around, go to the bathroom, I'll talk to myself in the mirror. The things you do when you don't have a sounding board. Okay, let's get it together, Ginie.